Very nice to be here and to see you all tonight. So as Kieran said, I have the lovely job of being Senior Curator of Special Collections. So I'm here to talk a little bit about what we're doing in relation to Powell and Pressburger. The first question I'm usually asked is, what is Special Collections? I know some of you may have visited us, but for those that haven't, I just want to take a quick moment to say a little bit more about what we are and what we do. So I think, we all know that film doesn't spring to the screen fully formed, but it's the result of a long and often deeply personal process of research, of planning, of production, publicity, and so much creativity. This can sometimes be months, sometimes years, sometimes decades, and it involves many, many creative minds and hands. In the case of Powell and Pressburger, there was a whole team of regular collaborators who were part of their process. And in terms of what we care for, it can be producer, director, designer, editor, cinematographer, continuity supervisor, and more. And it's these many hundreds of filmmaking practices involved in bringing film to life that we really deal with. So Special Collections represents just some of these journeys, really. We're essentially the personal and professional papers of those who have worked in the screen industries over the past century. And there are two key areas to it. The first, as demonstrated by my lovely colleague here, Caroline, is scripts, documents and ephemera. This is our store. I'd love to say that the boxes glow when we open them. Unfortunately, they don't, but it's an imaginative representation of the treasures that are contained within. So these are essentially the written archives of screen professionals. We represent nearly 1,000 individual archives of this kind. So examples being the archive of Michael Powell in its entirety, the archive of Emeric Pressburger in its entirety. And these are bodies of materials generated by one person's life, often a life lived through film. A set of traces of actions, the records left by that life. It might be writing, drawing, filming, interacting with colleagues and with society. So there's a whole range of documents and papers. It might include correspondence, production files, diaries, photographs, and more, all of which, help to shed light on each other. So one of the things I love about working with these archives, particularly something like Powell and Pressburger, is there's this kind of duet between the two. You get the dialogue through the archive. You might get a letter in one that's responded to in another. You might get a script that's passed backwards and forwards between collaborators to evolve a process. So all of this kind of imaginative process comes through in the papers that we keep. The other area is visual arts, essentially, so stills, photographs, posters and designs. And this area celebrates some of the most extraordinary screen crafts and behind-the-scenes artistry, so particularly design and photography. We span from the 18th century right through to the present day, and there are 3 large stores containing over 3 kilometres of shelving, which are filled floor to ceiling, as well as a growing archive of born digital material. And our job really is to provide access to these stories for current generations, as well as to collect and care for the archives of the future. So we operate a research service out at Berkhamsted at the BFI National Archive, where all this material is available to consult for free. And we also curate these materials through loans, displays, publications, as you've seen, tours, talks and events. But as a team, I think we're very aware that it's still a relatively hidden part of the film story, which means that we're really excited to present the unique programme that exists around Powell and Pressburger, Cinema Unbound. So this is really, for us, designed to unleash the magic of these collections. So tonight, I'm much shorter than Kieran, but I just want to give you a sneak preview of the exhibition that opens here at the BFI Southbank on the 10th of November. So we'll be taking over the upstairs spaces to tell the story of Powell and Pressburger's ultimate ballet film, The Red Shoes. And by the time they made The Red Shoes, Powell and Pressburger were obviously major figures in the story of British cinema. So there's that unique joint credit of written, directed and produced by. They had the brilliant collaborators with them that they always worked with, cinematographer Jack Cardiff, editor Reginald Mills, designer Hein Heckroth, art director Arthur Lawson, and we also care for the entire archive of sketch artist Ivor Beddoes, which is really brilliant because it shows you all of those kind of imaginative ideas before the film was funneled down into its final vision. So you get a real sense of what the film could have been as well as what it ended up being. And we know, that together they created an unrivaled series of bold and beautiful films. The Red Shoes is obviously described quite often, and by many fans, including Martin Scorsese, as a really key moment in their filmmaking, as it's poised between these artistic worlds, harnessing the power and beauty of ballet in film form, and in Powell's words, bringing together all arts as one. So it's inspired by the Hans Christian Andersen classic fairy tale, obviously The Red Shoes, and we follow the story of Victoria Page, played by real-life ballerina Moira Shearer, whose life is transformed by her role at the Ballet Lermontov. I think for anyone who knows this magical film in detail, you may also know that there's a lot that's already been said about its contribution to cinema, and also the enduring impact that it's had on a whole range of filmmakers, from Martin Scorsese's early championing to Greta Gerwig's recent ode to artificiality, Barbie. P&P's approach to filmmaking is really woven into the very fabric of British cinema. So how do we approach an exhibition on filmmakers who are so spoken about and where everybody has such a deep love for their cinema? Well, the first bit really for us was to try to activate the collections. Archives are fundamentally working groups of papers. They've had a life, they are tools of the trade, they've existed in the industry. And exhibitions are a great way to celebrate this aspect. They allow for a space for exchange of thoughts, ideas, and us to experience the actual object, to stand before something that's been put together as a tool, but also as an artwork in and of itself. As I said, we're very fortunate to care for the archives of Powell and Pressburger, as well as those of talented collaborators, Hein Heckroth and Ivor Beddoes, which offer an incredible opportunity to do this. For the exhibition, we completed around 1,000 hours, I think, of new research to try and gain new perspectives and stories around the collection. And my good colleague Caroline, who you saw ably demonstrating the archive earlier, completed nearly 30,000 hours of cataloguing, which I think gives you a sense of the enormity of these papers. Both Powell and Pressburger produced papers at a ferocious rate. They worked at a ferocious rate, and that legacy, endures. The second, I think, thing for us to think about was Powell and Pressburger's relationship to the wider art. Exhibitions exist, obviously, within a wider arts framework, and Powell and Pressburger are really interesting because they continue to influence those contemporary fields of art, design, music, and dance, perhaps like no other filmmakers. And The Red Shoes really pushed the envelope in terms of its presentation of dance on screen. Although there have been many, many dance films before then, nothing quite captured the pleasure and pain of ballet in the same way. So we settled on the idea of centering the exhibition on Moira Shearer. Here is someone who, at just 21 years old, a successful principal dancer with Sadler's Wells, is completely new to the world of film. So we wanted to think about this personal journey as she discovers the very beautiful yet troubling world of film for the first time. She's going into it really with sort of eyes wide open. And as a figure, she's someone that we spend an awful lot of time looking at, but relatively little time with her, given her stardom. So we wanted to take a moment, really, to think about that. So the exhibition starts in 1937. Leading producer of the time, Alexander Korda, is searching for his next box office success. It will star his future wife, the glamorous new star, Merle Oberon. Industry rumours start to swirl of a film derived from an old legend of a girl who wore red shoes which made her dance unceasingly. So this is the first record we can find in the archives of what will become the Red Shoes. At this point, neither Powell nor Pressburger were involved. Korda recruited a series of writers to bring his vision to life, the longest of which, over 2 years, was G.B. Stern, Gertrude Bertha Stern, who develops this tale of an English girl who is taken in by a hypnotic ballet master, Constantine. In this version of the tale, the young ballerina, simply called Merle, the star's Merle, called Merle, escapes her destiny and lives to love again. And to bring this part of the tale to life, because often in the archive, and particularly in the case of Powell and Pressburger, there might be as much material that's unrealised as is realised. There's a lot there about ideas that were brimming, that never quite came to fruition, or that never made it to the screen. So how do we start to represent that something that never quite made it, that wasn't there? So what we've done is we've worked with an artist, Michelle Williams-Gamaker, to present a kind of fictionalized interpretation of this moment, just to give it a sense of life. And she's done this beautiful piece where she presents a fictionalized makeup test for Merle Oberon, somebody who had quite a complicated relationship with her visual identity in these years. And Gamaker interprets the script as a love letter from Korda to Oberon, with Korda speaking the lines of Constantine during this test. So this just allows us to tease out the spaces of casting and screen testing and those relationships that extend behind the camera to many, many individuals, particularly in this case, those who held Oberon's career and her image in their power. So unhappy with each new version of the script, Korda finally abandons the project in 1939 and sells the concept to Powell and Pressburger. I think Pressburger always said that, a lot of the fundamental elements were there when he inherited the material. But I think it's also fair to say that they completely transformed the story at this point. They travelled to Anderson's home in Odense. We hold materials relating to that visit. And the writer-directors imagine a film that's much closer to the passion and violence of its Danish source. So that source in which the girl in the ever-dancing red shoes pleads to be released from their power with devastating consequences. The figure of Constantine ultimately becomes Boris Lermontov, a charismatic and uncompromising character that we all know well, who contains, I think, more than a hint of Alexander Korda. That remains in there. And Merle, of course, becomes Victoria Page. So this part of the exhibition will take place in the mezzanine gallery, where we have the opportunity to introduce the story and the storytellers. This will be quite a quiet section, and we're working with a designer and art director, Simon Costin, to enclose the mezzanine gallery on both sides. At a collections level, this reduces light and noise and makes the whole area feel a little more intimate. And throughout the exhibition, we're going to borrow from the language of Powell and Pressburger's cinema. This is a really interesting opportunity for us, I think. We wanted to work with an art director on this space, somebody who understands the smoke and mirrors and magic that's involved in filmmaking. And this, Powell and Pressburger cinema can often be very painterly, very artificial, very derived from the built set in terms of the aesthetic. So that's something that we really wanted to pay homage to in terms of the space. So we're draping and festooning the space with details inspired by the colours and materials of the Red Shoes production. All of these are taken from stills in the film. So 1937, by 1946, Powell and Pressburger had a clear vision of the story they wanted to tell, and were ready to start planning the Red Shoes in detail. So we know that it centres on the story of a young woman, Victoria Page, falling in love both with her art form and with a fellow artist, the composer Julian Craster. So in Powell's eyes, Moira Shearer was the very embodiment of Victoria Page. Born in Scotland, Shearer was a principal dancer with Sadler's Wells. On the brink of international success, she was initially quite hesitant, I think, to step into the world of film. And we know that she declined the offer a number of times. But Powell was insistent. The role absolutely belonged to Shearer. It took nearly a year, but the announcement of her acceptance came in 1947. The role would be both career and life-changing for Shearer, catapulted almost overnight to global stardom with a tour of the USA following the film's box office success. Shearer's image was used to represent the film internationally, and her burnished auburn hair associated with that kind of unfettered creativity, I guess, of the Red Shoes themselves. And we're working quite closely with the Shearer archive and the Shearer family in order to present, I guess, that much more personal experience of what it was to live through that moment. In this part of the exhibition, we're again using the language of Powell and Pressburger's cinema to inspire the space. So this drawing by Red Shoes designer Hein Heckroth was our starting point for the space. Moira Shearer as Victoria Page is just in view at the bar there, but it's not yet her story. She is still someone who is bound up in the world of composers and storytellers and filmmakers who are putting together her world for her, as this sort of figure in the foreground suggests. So we're quite lucky in that we have a space that lends itself surprisingly well to a ballet rehearsal room. So with some subtle adaptations, we can pretty much recreate this lovely classroom from the film. One thing that I am often asked, actually, is what happened to all of the original props and sets from the film. Invariably, although there are rare exceptions, they were broken down and many original elements were recycled, reused or destroyed. There was simply no need or space to keep such elements. So as I said, we took that decision really to invest in design, craftsmanship to take us into the world of the built set. It's a key part of Powell and Pressburger's filmmaking, particularly in terms of expression of behind-the-scenes detailing. So another detail here. Then from this point, we invite you, as exhibition goers, to step over the threshold between the real and imagined world and into the story and shoes quite literally, of Vicky Page. This moment we felt was quite important to really pay homage to that sense of Powell and Pressburger's desire for all arts to be as one. So music, art, light and dance magically combine in the Red Shoes to transport us, in Michael Powell's words, inside the head of two people who are falling in love. So we'll be including lots of kind of, I guess, elements that are derived from not only the language but the technology of cinema. So this is a Pepper's Ghost installation that we'll be using to bring to life the shoemaker's shopfront. The very famous sequence, the 15 to 17 minute ballet sequence in the centre of the film, the Ballet of the Red Shoes, in which the Anderson tale is presented by the Ballet Lermontov, will be presented in the exhibition as a series of scenes. So we will be presenting original artworks from the archive, which are just beautiful, so painterly, so thoughtful, drawn from Hein Heckroth and sketch artist Ivor Beddoes, who both contributed to the drawn process and helped really to bring Powell and Pressburger's visual world to life. And just as the film is shot out of sequence, carefully pieced together in the editing suite, so too we want to structure this room thematically. We want you to be able to immerse yourself in a way in the filmmaking process, which isn't always neat, which isn't always linear. So as you see from this mood board, the space will be littered with those behind-the-scenes details that Powell and Pressburger love so much. And of course, we will be including the Red Shoes. We'd be amiss not to, wouldn't we? There were actually many, many pairs of Red Shoes generated for production. We are still discovering some of them. They do exist. Quite a lot are unworn. Obviously, those that were worn almost to destruction. But this particular pair is very evocative for me. It's generously on loan from Martin Scorsese, and it does have those telltale signs of wear and use. They've had a life. They've been part of the film. And of course, Powell and Pressburger's totemic red slippers, imbued with a magic that inhabits their wearer, never truly stop dancing. In interview, Shearer was honest about the mental and physical toll that the production took on her. But just as Vicky returned to the final scenes of the Red Shoes to perform for her company director one last time, so too Shearer seemed unable to resist the possibility of another performance with Powell and Pressburger. So we'll be nodding to her return in both The Tales of Hoffmann and Peeping Tom, where in Shearer not only the Red Shoes but also the girl danced on. And in this final section, we really wanted to pay tribute to that enduring legacy. When Shearer did finally hang up her points, the magic of the Red Shoes went on to inspire generations of creative practitioners, and I think that's something that we really note at the start of the project. More than any other filmmakers, really, that I've come across, these are some of the most cited in terms of inspiration points for contemporary artists and practitioners and makers. So we wanted to include a nod to that. So in 1993, musician Kate Bush created a studio album, The Red Shoes, followed by the extended music video, The Line, The Cross and the Curve. We're working with the photographer on that shoot to include some behind-the-scenes pictures of Kate Bush on set. And what's really lovely is that Bush and Powell were both actually in active correspondence. Powell never really stopped his creative process right through to the end of his life. He was still imagining, still thinking up ideas that could be, which included a potential collaboration with Kate Bush. So there's a lovely kind of letter in the archive where he writes to her about music. Bush also, said that her album, paid tribute fundamentally to the Red Shoes as a film and evolved out of a feeling she had one day at the piano of music running away with itself. The image in her mind was like a horse galloping and running away, with the horses turned into running feet and then shoes galloping away with themselves. More recently, you may know Matthew Bourne's production of The Red Shoes, which brings together Powell and Pressburger's story with the music of Bernard Herrmann, and we're very excited to be welcoming Matthew Bourne for an event in November. In the exhibition, we'll be including costumes for Victoria Page, here danced by Ashley Shaw. With the support of Bourne's choreography and Les Brotherston's brilliant designs, Shaw takes on the demanding role to bring the blood red points to life for new audiences. And I couldn't let you go without another mention of our related publication, the Cinema Powell and Pressburger. I just want to touch on this briefly because while an exhibition is fantastic, the narrative is necessarily framed by both the space and the objects that we have available to work with. Publications such as this one are so important for an archive, particularly illustrated ones, because they help us to transmit the essence of a filmmaker's practice out to the world. It has over 250 images, and it's been a joy to work on it because it allows us as archivists to share a sense of these as glorious, tactile, tangible, and working objects. We structured the book thematically, deliberately, so we could base it around the stories that came out of the archives that we were working with. And there are contributors from across the arts who plunge us deep into the magical heart of these collections. These papers are so important, I think, because they help to reveal the cornerstones of Powell and Pressburger's cinema. They speak about those things that we're all familiar with, questions about collaboration, artistry, identity, and belonging that really resonate to this day. And I just wanted to end, again, by saying a huge thank you to those of you that are here and supporting this, but also to the many, many colleagues who have worked on these new ventures with me. Although I'm the one standing here, it's taken, as they say, a village. So particularly Rydian, who's steered everything so brilliantly, but also Caroline Bevin, who worked tirelessly to catalogue the Michael Powell archive, as I said, over many, many hours. All of that is now available via our collection search online. And for anyone looking to dive deeper into Powell and Pressburger's archives, it's an incredible place to start. So I would encourage you all to dig more deeply.